Do you know these situations when you are at home and everything seems normal, but something changes? It's like if the air gets heavier, like if someone was looking at you, but when you look around you, there's nothing there. But then you feel that there is something there, hidden in the shadows. Imagine this. You are at home, perhaps watching television or using your cell phone, when suddenly you hear footsteps in the country. At first you think it must be your imagination. After all, who would be walking around the house at this hour? But then the steps become stronger, closer. Crude wood floor, and you know you're not alone. Your heart starts barking faster and you feel a scalding sensation coming from your spine. You get up, look around the pasillo, nothing. Just silence. Intent to calm down, telling you that it's just the wind or maybe the house is working, as the mayors say. But all the windows are closed and there is no wind. Luego goes back to sit down, but now every little sound seems amplified. A slight touch, a cross, it seems like everyone is trying to decide something. That night, you lie in bed, trying to forget those thoughts, but the sweat simply doesn't come. The room is dark, the only sound is the tick of the clock on the wall. Suddenly you feel a chill. It's as if something had just passed by you, but you couldn't see anything. Then, in the absolute silence of the night, you hear it. It's barely noticeable, but it's there, a voice whispering your name. Your heart almost falls off your chest. You sit in bed, you look around, but again, there's nothing there. Try to think of a rational explanation. Maybe it was just the noise in the house, or maybe you were half asleep and your brain thought you were a suitcase in the past. But that doesn't convince you. Then, the next day, your brother comments on something that worries you even more. He said he was a noche, while he was sleeping, he felt a cold feeling in his ears. He even woke up scared, thinking there was someone there, but of course, he didn't see anything. It was just a dream, he said, trying to recover. But you know he was also scared. Because it wasn't just a dream, it wasn't just imagination. It was real. Pass the days and things only become worse. One night, we are in the living room when we hear a sound coming from the cliff floor. Suena like an old door opening, but the problem is there is no old door there. Hecho, he didn't even have a balcony. But the sound is clear, unmistakable. You climb the stairs slowly, each step seems higher than the previous one and your heart beats in your throat. When you get there you see nothing. Only the empty pasillo, weakly lit by the light of the moon that entered through the windows. These are small moments, these things that seem so simple and, nevertheless, so terrifying, they keep piling up. And then when you empathize with yourself, you ask yourself, is this house, this place that is supposed to be safe, really home to something or someone? Something that may have always been there, waiting for the right moment to show itself? Time passes, but things don't improve. Your brother is committed to avoiding certain rooms in the house and you realize that he doesn't like being alone for long periods of time. His mood changes, he becomes more calm, more thoughtful. And MPs is feeling the same. The house, which used to be a place of comfort, becomes overwhelming and suffocates you. Every night, you wait for nothing to happen, but always, somehow, something strange happens. A whisper, a touch, a sound that shouldn't be there. Then, one day you find something. Maybe you're in the basement, that's the place you always avoid. It's an old box filled with octopus, hidden behind some boxes of tools. When you open it you find old photographs, yellow letters from time to time. They are people who we don't know, but who seem to have a connection with the house. That's when the truth begins to reveal itself. You discover that many years ago, this house belonged to a family that mysteriously disappeared. Nadia never supposes that they passed, but some say that something bad if they took them. Something that never came out of the house. Something that has now returned and is feeding on your fear. The house is not alone. She is alive, with an evil that becomes stronger with each new fear, with each new scare. You are trapped in it, without knowing how to escape. Every sound, every shadow, every whisper is a reminder that you are not alone. The more you try to ignore it, the more powerful this presence is again. Until one day you realize that there is no place where there is, because whatever is there for you. And this is how you find yourself in the same situation as so many others that have come before. Trapped in a house that, on the outside, looks very normal, but inside it's a real nightmare. A place where the line between the real and the imaginary blurs, where fear is the only certainty. So, you ask yourself, can you get out of this house before it devours you completely? Will you become, like so many others, a scorching story told by anyone who dares to approach this accursed place?
I hope you liked the story, because the second story is even more chilling. Just don't forget to see if you're already subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any terrifying stories.
Do you know when you feel like something isn't right? It passed me once, and until today I couldn't forget it. It was assumed that it would be a few days like that we spent cleaning the house with nothing special. Finally, I decided to look for a view in the open air, this place we often never go to, but it's always there, accumulating octopus and junk. I climbed the cruel stairs, pushing the attic door, which gave way with a terrifying hiss. The air there was dense, as if nothing had been left there for years. I decided to review some boxes, just to see if there was anything interesting, and then, on a whim, I decided to take some photos. You know, just to register the space. I didn't expect to find much. I just wanted to capture some images to remember what it was like before organizing everything. Take out my cell phone and start taking photos. Click, click, click. I moved from one side to the other, pointing the camera at dusty corners and forgotten objects. The attic was dark, but the faint light that came in through the small windows was enough to see everything clearly. But when I finish and start watching the photos, something strange happens. When looking at the images on the screen of my cell phone, I noticed a black spot in the corner of each photo. I was curious, after all, I hadn't noticed anything different while I was there. Maybe it was a shadow, I think. Maybe it was just a fall from the camera. He returns to the attic, this time with an intern, determined to find out what caused the stain. I searched every corner, looked at the interior of the walls, the dirt, the roof. But I couldn't find anything that could justify the stain in the photos. Then, with the flashlight in one hand and the cell phone in the other, you start taking more photos. And there the stain was new. Only this time it seemed bigger, darker. With each new click, the point becomes bigger, as if it were absorbing the surrounding light. It was as if the darkness was expanding, extending across the photographs, taking over everything. My heart started barking faster. The sensation of discomfort grew, as if the air itself had become heavy, difficult to breathe. I decided to go down to the attic, but when I was about to get out, I felt a cold scald on my back. It was as if someone was looking at me. Meyer was behind, but I saw nothing but shadows. The light from the interior was on my hands, and I guess I had to get out of there as quickly as possible. I just run down the stairs and closed the attic door, as if that could protect me. When I calmed down a little, I went back to looking at the photos. The stain was on all of them, increasingly large, increasingly dense. But there was something bad. In one of the photos, right in the center of the stain, there seemed to be a shape, a figure. It wasn't very clear, but it seemed to be a persona, at least the shadow of one. If he bleeds me, I'll bleed. Whatever it was, I was at the top, in the attic. And I couldn't see it at a glance, but the camera captured it. Suddenly everything made sense, the sensation of being watched, the heavy air, the darkness that seemed alive. I knew I wasn't alone. In the following days, avoid the Atlantic on the entire coast. But the feeling that there was something up there didn't leave me in peace. At night, in the silence of the house, I could hear soft footsteps, as if someone was moving slowly across the attic. Finally, I decided that I needed to do something. I couldn't live with that shadow over me, literally. Then I called a friend who understood these things, a guy who had had strange experiences and knew how to confront them. He came to my house and together we went up to the attic. He carries some equipment with him, including a high-resolution camera and an audio recorder. As soon as we entered, the air seemed to become even more dense, almost suffocating. I was about to suggest that we leave, but my friend was taking photos, walking along the attic with confidence. After a mouse, he stopped and looked at me with a serious expression on his face. "There's something here, and he's trying to communicate," he says, while he adjusts the recorder. We started asking simple questions, things like, "What's here? What do you want?" At first nothing happened. But then, the recorder stopped capturing extraneous noises, pops, as if something was moving around us. He was about to ask us to leave when he clearly heard a whisper. It was soft, almost imperceptible, but it was there. "Is it worse?" It wasn't just a whisper. It was my name. My friend also heard him and looked worried. He asked some bad questions, but the only answer we received was an oppressive silence. We decided that the best thing was to go and analyze the recordings elsewhere. When we finally downloaded and analyzed the photos and recordings, the truth revealed itself in a terrifying way. The figure in the black spot was much clearer, as if it were coming out of the shadow, trying to come out into the light. The audio captured a series of whispers, all saying the same thing, my name, repeated several times. I knew I needed to do something to get rid of him. My friend suggested that we seek spiritual help, someone who could clean the attic and get rid of everything that was there. I didn't waste time. I called a local priest who had wine and performed a blessing ritual. After that, the attic returned to being just one attic. The blurry image of the photos disappeared, the whispers ceased, and the feeling of discomfort finally disappeared. But today, every time I see a shadow in the corner of a photo, I can't help but ask myself if it really hadn't disappeared. What happens if he's still there, waiting to reveal himself again?
I hope you liked the story, because the third story is even more chilling. Just don't forget to see if you're already subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any terrifying stories. I hope you liked the story.
Have you ever been to a place where everything seemed normal, but there was something that made you feel an inexplicable discomfort? How would your surroundings whisper ancient secrets to you, secrets that only the most attentive could capture? This strange feeling that worries you, for no apparent reason, has been with me for a long time. When I was a child, I lived in an old house, a 19th century building that originally served as a hotel. This house was majestic, with an imposing facade and huge windows that seemed to overlook everything around it. But behind her beauty there was something dark, something that could not be seen but felt. The house had its own personality, as if it were alive. The walls seemed to breathe, the floors felt raw even when someone walked on them, and the air always felt colder than it was outside, even on the hottest days. It was as if the house had tried to decide something, but the words were lost among the echoes of times past. I remember a night in particular, a night that still made my heart accelerate with just thinking about it. I was in the living room, sitting on the sofa with a book, trying to ignore the feeling that someone was looking at me. The chimenea crackled softly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Estaba sol, the least is so pensaba. Suddenly there was a sound, a light whisper that seemed to be coming from the country. At first I thought it was just the wind, but soon I realized that the sound was getting closer and becoming stronger. My eyes were fixed on the door of the cell, waiting for something to appear from someone. But nothing appeared. Just the sound, like a distant murmur, resonating throughout the house. I got up, trying to ignore the fear that was rising through my column, and went out to the ground. The lights were faint and only illuminated the path ahead. I looked at the rooms, all of which were empty except for the room at the end of the room, which was always closed with a key. It was a room that my parents never opened and one that always prohibited me from entering. He said that it was dangerous, that there were things in that room that he shouldn't see. But that night the room was ajar. I felt my heart barking faster as I got closer. The door opened when I slowly opened it, revealing a powder room with furniture covered with white sheets. There was a smell of humidity in the air, mixed with something sweet and sick. And then I saw it. In the center of the room there was a mesadora and a figure was sitting in it. She was a woman, dressed in antique clothes, with a pale and expressionless face. Her eyes were fixed on me, but they were empty, lifeless. I felt a scalding rush across my body, and before I could react, the figure began to slowly balance the hill backwards and forwards, without breaking the gaze. My mind went into a panic, but my body felt paralyzed, unable to move. The figure continued to balance, and the sound of the Scylla resonated throughout the room. And then she spoke, with a weak voice and dragging the words, "Now you're in my house." I couldn't leave myself there for a second longer. I ran down the path back to the living room, my heart beat wildly. Closed the bedroom door behind me, as if I could keep what was inside there. And then, all in silence. The house seemed normal again, but I knew it wasn't. I knew there was something there, something I didn't want to be there. From that night things changed. Empista listened to steps the first few hours of the morning, as if someone was walking around the house, but when I was going to review it, I couldn't wait. The objects moved without explanation, and I felt that this presence was stronger, as if I were watching every moment. My family also stopped noticing the extraneous things that were happening. My mother says that she felt slight touches on her shoulder when she was alone in the kitchen, but when she said to go back, she couldn't go there. My father, who had always been skeptical about these types of things, began to wake up late at night with the feeling that someone was standing next to his bed. He said they were just nightmares, but I knew he was scared. A visitor commented on the time that he had seen a woman standing by the window of the closed room, looking outwards. But when we went up to check, the room was empty, as always. The stories about the house began to spread throughout the neighborhood, and people tried to avoid it, saying it was cursed. Over time, my family decided to move. The house, with all its grandeur, was left behind. But until today, when I go there, I feel that same feeling of discomfort. As if the house was still alive, waiting, watching. Are you? Have you ever been to a place where everything seemed normal, but there was something you couldn't ignore? Something that makes your heart speed up and your mind wonders whether it was real or not. If you ever feel this way, pay attention. Maybe the place is trying to tell you something you're not prepared to hear.
Tell me which story made your hair stand on end? Tell me which one you liked the most? Because in the next video, the story is even more chilling. Just don't forget to see if you're already subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any terrifying stories.